Today, I have the pleasure of being joined by Jason Trost, the CEO and founder of the betting exchange Smarkets and bookmaker SBK. Welcome to the pod, Jason. It's great to have you on.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much for making the time. First of all, I'm intrigued as to how you, as an American, find yourself in London and set up a betting exchange in Smarkets, especially as exchanges are more of a UK, European concept.
Yeah, it was very random. One of my best friends from undergrad was living here at the time and is still living here, in fact. And we were hanging out one day and we're kicking around business ideas. And along came this idea to set up a betting exchange. So I was young at the time. I lived in New York and he said, "Do you want to do this startup with me?" And I said, "Yeah, that sounds great." And so quit my job in New York and moved over to London, and the rest is history.
Okay. When was that? When did you set it up?
I set it up 2007, 2008. So quite, 15 years ago now, something like that.
Yeah. Because we'll get on to Betfair, but obviously at the time they were and still are the big dog when it comes to exchanges, weren't they? So
yep.
You felt there was an edge, no doubt, to take them on.
Yeah, the founding story was I was a stock trader and I'm really into politics. And so my first exposure to betting exchanges was in-trade trade sports that let people trade the US presidential election. And I thought, oh my God, this is so cool that you can buy and sell in an election. But I studied computer science at uni and I was a professional trader and I couldn't understand the interface. And I'm like, my God, if I can't understand it, there's got to be a better way to do this. And then on top of that, my aforementioned buddy from undergrad was living in London and he said Betfair is printing money, but two of the guys he worked with in the city were big Betfair users and were complaining about it all the time. Transaction fees are very high. And I looked into it and just the bid offer spread or the implicit transaction fee plus a real transaction fee, it was just an incredibly inefficient market, even though that they were the most efficient option at the time and were doing very well fiscally. We thought that there was a lot of room for improvement on the model that they brought to the market.
And I know political betting is a big area of interest in lots of markets at Smarkets. But alongside, obviously, the interest from people in the financial sector, what other type of person comes to use Smarkets ahead of Betfair? Because presumably they'll have heard of Betfair before you, most likely. Why are they then flocking to Smarkets? What's the options that you offer and the advantages of your platform?
I would say the main advantage is price. In some cases, liquidity. I would say over the years, Betfair liquidity has actually gotten thinner and thinner. I think the main reason is price. Either the bid offer spread is tighter or our commission is lower. So we start people out at a 2% commission. If you sign up through a certain channel, you can get 0% commission for a certain period of time. So I've been very successful with the price sensitive match better for about 10 years now. And that's kind of been our bread and butter. And then on top of that, the sort of professional, semi-professional power users that want something a little bit more advanced than sort of a sports book and are price sensitive have been choosing us over Betfair. But the opposite end of the question is I thought that we would be a lot more competitive against Betfair, and we haven't been. And I think there's still some things that we haven't quite checked off our list. I think our liquidity, first of all, I would say Betfair liquidity writ large is very, very bad. And I say that as somebody who's been competing with them, and our liquidity, generally speaking, is worse than their liquidity. Now, we do a lot of our liquidity provisioning in-house, and we have pretty big plans to kind of ramp that stuff up. So I think at some point we'll leapfrog Betfair, which is really important. If you think of the betting exchange industry as a class, it's been kind of a sideways product for a long time. And I think the big thing missing is that sort of liquidity provisioning, which I think Betfair struggles with, and we struggle more than them. But I think that's where there's a big opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Because in terms of liquidity, and we'll no doubt talk about things like affordability, that seems to be having an impact. And so especially in terms of Betfair, and no doubt it's a challenge for yourselves. Mm-hmm. But I also see you've got a few different innovations that you offer at Smarkets, custom multiples, for example. Do you find there's a lot of people taking up those kind of things? Are they making a big difference when you're able to implement, some innovation, which is quite lacking in this sector?
Yeah, in terms of innovation, I kind of view sports betting a little bit more like banking in the sense that people have been banking for thousands of years. So, there's a crowd in the UK. I'm not sure how much of our audience is UK versus the US, but in the UK, there's a whole bunch of challenger banks. And I remember when they first came on the scene, I was thinking like, I bank with Lloyd's. They charge me no fees. Like, why would I ever want to switch to a challenger bank? And I have become a really big user of Revolut. And the thing I learned about Revolut is they're not doing anything new that you couldn't do before with a traditional bank. They just make it easier, cheaper, faster. And that's what I view as what's lacking in the sports industry. I don't think that the sports betting industry is missing some exotic bet type. I think that just everything is painful in sports betting. The main issue of pain is the bid offer spread that you pay or the implicit transaction fee that you pay. But if you think about moving money around, getting to a market, using the product, it's all very painful. And so I don't think there's innovation so much to occur in sports betting insofar as just making what we've been doing for hundreds, if not thousands of years in sports betting is to make it easier, faster, and better, similar to what the challenger banks have been quite successful doing in the UK.
No, that's a good point. Yes, because I use Revolut, use Wise, use other companies, and there's no long-winded applications. You don't have to wait weeks to have an answer. You get that quickly, and you can move money very, very, very swiftly, and all the fees are transparent as well. I think that's the other point you're talking there about commission. And one of the complaints about Betfair is obviously their premium charge. You have a market makers outlined, is that right? 20% of profits, and then different tiers. How does what you do, in terms of the power user, as you term them, how do they like your setup?
We're not optimized for them. We're trying to optimize for the normal bettor or the match bettor or the sort of the everyday bettor. We have an API. I think we have probably about 50 partners on our API. And it's not a part of the business that we've been heavily invested in. Since we are so successful at provisioning liquidity ourselves, I think, a couple of minutes ago, I was talking the big challenge of Betfair and our challenge is to increase the liquidity. And I think the reason why, I don't know how much you want to get into the philosophy of market making sports, but there's very few people in the world that do it. There's very few people in the world that want to do it. And there's very few people that can do it. And so what I've learned about what's going on in Betfair, besides sort of the fact that some of the retail flow is getting sucked out of the system, so the financial incentive to market make is going down and down and down, it's very difficult because there's so much information. The technical term for it is information asymmetry in sports betting. So just to put things in perspective, I believe that there's around 2,000 to 3,000 stocks listed on the New York Stock Exchange, plus or minus. And if I want to trade every stock, I need to have 3,000 order books and, an opinion on 3,000 different things. I'm not sure what we're up to now, but I think at any given time, we have about 50,000 different things that somebody can bet on. And this isn't like IBM stock that has, the IBM stock of the 80s is the same as the IBM stock of 2023. Sports betting changes all the time. The match is over in an hour, then there's a new match. So there's just an incredible amount of surface area for market making sports. And then you couple that with this concept of information asymmetry, which is an economist way of saying that if somebody knows something you don't know, they're able to monetize that. And if you think about, this player's injured first, or Messi's not going to start, or the set was won 0.5 seconds before the bookie knew it. There's all these instances where you can get picked off over and over and again. So, and I would say like the last reason why Betfair suffers from liquidity is because in sports betting, you need a lot of financial acumen and a lot of financial skill set. And if you have that, generally speaking, you're incentivized just to go to finance because I'm going to make a number up, but the financial industry is probably, the liquidity in the market is probably 100,000 times bigger than sports betting, 10,000 times bigger than sports betting. So if you're good at what you do, the nice thing about the financial market, not to say anything about the underlying difficulty about trading commodities versus sports versus anything else, but if you're right and your thesis is right, you just have so much more ample opportunity to trade, whereas with Betfair, you're limited to the amount of retail flow that's on that platform, and you don't have any access to the retail flow that goes to the sports books. So I'm sorry, I'm getting a little bit academic.
No, it's good. It's good.
I'm getting a little bit academic on the market making of betting exchanges, and that's why Betfair is suffering. Now, what we have done, which I think is the right solution, is to be able to provide that liquidity provisioning ourselves. But we have to manage, the 50,000 contracts, the information asymmetry, all these kinds of things, which makes it challenging.
And that's called Hanson Applied Sciences. So that's where you provide the liquidity. You set that up.
Correct.
Because that chicken and eggs, isn't it? You can't have liquidity without customers, and then you can't have customers without liquidity. So
yes.
Tell me about how that all got started and how difficult it was to set up your own trading arm.
Well, Hanson completely was an accident. It was something I remember very firmly thinking when I started this business, I didn't know anything about sports betting. And I didn't want to trade sports. I was like, I don't know anything about it. It's not my bag. And, I just want to be a neutral marketplace. Think, like eBay, and you upload your own toy truck to sell on it. And I just want to take a commission. But very quickly, I learned as a young entrepreneur trying to go around getting people to market make, A, there were very, very few market makers, and B, the few market makers that existed, I think you could count them on one hand at the time, and probably still today, actually. Nobody wanted to deal with a small exchange that had no volume because, it takes a long time to integrate, yada, yada, yada. So anyway, we had to build it ourselves out of necessity. And out of necessity, because we didn't raise a lot of money, when our first versions of the market maker were just designed to get prices up on the screen, just to kind of get volume ticking over with the intention to break even or maybe make a slight profit. But there wasn't really the profit motive. It was more the chicken and egg motive. And then out of necessity, because we were short on cash, we just had to make it better and better and better. And at some point around 2013, 2014, it kind of turned the corner, and the rest is history. That was kind of our meal ticket to becoming a bigger, more substantial company, is figuring out that equation.
And obviously, I believe as well, from reading your recent reports, that it's a profitable angle as well. So it makes a profit from its trading.
Yep.
Is there an issue, though? Is there a conflict of interest whereby you obviously have access to all the information about where profits are being made, profitable users, that you could be tempted to swallow up some of that profit or take advantage of it for yourselves in some way?
Yep, it's a conflict of interest. You're right about that. But I was talking about that with somebody today. If you got rid of the conflict of interest, you would have to shut sports betting down. Because if you think about traditional sports betting, that's all sports books do. When I was a stock trader, I had to become a regulated securities broker, and you learn all the securities law. There's something called painting the tape and front running and insider trading and all these kinds of things that have become illegal in sports betting. Now, I think there are reasons beyond it's a bad idea that you don't necessarily want those things to become illegal in sports betting. But right now, sports betting is not a regulated financial activity. It's considered sort of an over-the-counter entertainment activity, at least from a regulation perspective. And it's completely legal. And indeed, it's a huge part of the business model of all the sports books. So if you make too much money, they shut you down, or they limit your account, or they do front run you, or et cetera, et cetera. So all the things that would not be kosher in a financial stock trading context are not only kosher, but they're very much part of the business model of the existing operators. Where, I want to tell customers, because I have a history in sort of securities, we try to be very, very fair, but we do have privileged information. We do have access to the order book and things like that. So we're upfront about it with our customers. It's just part of our platform. It's not something that we've ever hid, and it's just part of the ecosystem. But like I was saying, when I was getting into the philosophy of market making and things like that, I think it's the best solution for the industry, because if you take a Betfair model, which is kind of a open garden, laissez-faire kind of model, you see the liquidity trickling down and down and down because of some of the problems that I was talking about. So I think having our own liquidity provisioning in a semi-open garden mechanism is the right solution for the long term.
Mm-hmm. I guess there's a balance there, isn't there? Because you don't want to swallow up all the profits and take away from everybody else using it, but then you have to provide that liquidity and you want to make a profit from it. So how do you square that circle? How do you balance that out when you have those conversations about how you can make a profit from Hanson?
Well, I mean, of course, we're a capitalist company and our job is to return value to shareholders. So, I'm not going to sit here and say that we're a nonprofit and we're not trying to make money from our customers, because that's what we're here to do. We're here to make money. But I would say we have a guiding philosophy that I think is very important. We view ourselves as a financial technology company. And I would say almost every other sports betting company views themselves as an entertainment company. So if you go to industry conferences, you hear a lot of people talking about share of wallet, things like that. We tend to talk about it more about edge. And so we have target edges that we like, that we're shooting for, which is in sort of like that 2 to 4% range. Mm-hmm. And if you look at the target edge of a sports book, it's like 8, 9, 10%. So let's say we, there's a huge amount of variance in sports betting. And if we make 5% because some sporting events went our way or something like that, it's great to make the money. But we don't high five ourselves. We think we want to see that sort of long-term lower margin, because that fits in with the philosophy of what we're trying to do, which is basically to financialize the sports betting industry and make it a lot more efficient. So that's sort of how we find that balance, is that we use our competition to kind of guide us for what not to do. And we're trying to have a better offering and a better price than pretty much anybody else in the market.
Well, that's the theme of the SBK adverts as well. And that's a nice segue to talk about SBK, because you're pushing back against the bad behavior and the practices of bookmakers. So as I understand it, you created SBK for those customers who perhaps find exchanges too challenging, or, whatever reason it puts them off. There's a cleaner interface. That was set up in 2019. What's the take-up been of SBK since then?
It's been our growth engine. I mean, that's where we're seeing our growth. That's where we've been investing, and I'm very excited about that. The founding story of that was, sort of back when I was thinking about setting up Smarkets. My big thing was I couldn't understand Betfair, trade sports, and I was thinking that there's a better way to do this. And sort of Robinhood had some success trying to, for those of you that are in the UK, Robinhood's sort of a low-cost trading platform that's sort of for millennials, if you like. I know that Betfair and even BetDAC tried for years and years to have a sort of an easier, more understandable interface, and it just never worked. And so we played around with easier interfaces to try to broaden out the market. But I kind of made the decision that retail sports bettors want a retail sports betting experience. And so if you try to shove them in, even if it's pretty with a nice logo, and shove them into sort of some marketplace dynamics, they're going to be uncomfortable with that. So instead of trying to push Smarkets in kind of a Robinhood direction and sort of iterate on some of the experiments that Betfair did to go after the more retail, we decided why don't we just build a sportsbook that sits on top of the exchange? And that's what we did. So SBK is designed to take its prices from the exchange, so you get some of the efficiency of the exchange with the sportsbook interface, and have the happy medium that should make everybody happy. Really great odds and a really great user experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was looking before, some of the horse racing, for example. There was a horse trading at 2.74 on Smarkets. There was 2.7 to back on SBK. So, I guess taking into account commission and transaction fees, that's it's very, very close. The liquidity in the markets as well, especially when you've got weak liquidity and you're trying to price up based on exchange markets whereby you don't have perhaps accurate pricing, and then you're putting together multiples, and then obviously the liability is a lot greater potentially on that. Yeah, and that's one of the questions in terms of when you have a weak market. Let's say you're betting on horse racing 10 hours before the event versus 10 minutes. How do you work out how much you're going to, what kind of liabilities you're happy to stack up?
Well, that's kind of what we do day in and day out. So to your point, it's not easy. And, markets early on are incredibly thin. So we have a bunch of mathematical models that try to help us decide how much risk we want to offer depending on the circumstances of the event. But that is the hard work of what we do. And it's never ending.
Does that factor into how much people can get on or how much they can win? Because
of course.
Yeah. Is there information for the customer to find out what their max payout might be? Or
well, on SBK, I believe when you're placing a bet and we're not willing to take that much of a risk, we tell you how much you can bet at that price. So almost every bookie that I know of has a limit of market per bettor. We don't do that. We have a limit because we're an exchange. We have a limit at the time of betting. So one unique thing that we let people do at SBK that, like I said, I don't think other sportsbooks do. We let you bet over and over again. So, if there's only 10 pounds available and you want 100 pounds on, it might be a little bit annoying, but you can bet 10 times if you like.
Like Pinnacle, the rebet model.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you want to bet more than we allow you to, you can just wait, essentially.
Okay. I guess there's no restriction or closure of accounts for from customers that's successful. I imagine people listening would be intrigued and be wondering, how can you offer this? And is this something that's potentially they can use without getting closed down?
We don't look kindly if we think people are sort of flouting the rules, like court siding or time advantage or things like that. But we want to create a platform where everybody can profit from it. So we're trying to be the good guys in the industry and create a place for anybody can bet.
That's good. I'm sure that'll encourage people. I don't think I have any courtsiders that listen. And I wouldn't be trying to represent them. But
it's not just courtsiders. If you can imagine with a surface area of 50,000 events, there's all kinds of things that you could do to get an unfair advantage. I would put betting into two categories: good faith betting and bad faith betting. Good faith betting is when you're betting on your knowledge, you think you know better than the market, you have a view, and you place a bet. We are 100% cool with that. To me, bad faith betting is when you are trying to beat the system, finding bugs or issues with the system. So like manipulating prices, or like court siding is an obvious example, but there's a lot more sort of subtle ways to beat the system than just court siding. That category of betting I categorize as bad faith betting. We don't care about servicing the needs of bad faith bettors, and we don't want them to use our platform.
Yeah, it calls to mind, I did an interview with, I can't remember who it was now, who worked in the City of London, was in the City of London, and then they had a kind of a betting shop that they'd go in that had satellite, which was for racing, which was like, I don't know, a few seconds ahead of everybody else. And they were able to take advantage of that until the technology caught up. But yes, I appreciate that those gaps do exist and the difference between good and bad faith. So talking about SBK, are you actually no longer allowed to check it, are you? I was looking before. Is that, but you are doing other noticeable sponsorship deals, and there's been adverts, I think, that you weren't allowed to publish or put on like terrestrial TV, which is a shame because I thought they were really good. I guess there's a real conscious attempt to really drive the brand at the moment, isn't there?
Yeah, there's a funny story behind not putting on TV. So there's a regulator in the UK. I don't know if it's Ofcom or something like that. Actually, I'm pretty sure it's not Ofcom, but there's a regulator that approves all tele advertisements in this country. I had no idea. And basically they have some, 1950s view of the world where you can't, quote unquote, disparage your competitors. So we had this concept in the ad. We had Gary Pallister, not getting a job because, we don't hire ex-professional footballers. And just having that sort of was seen to be disparaging Paddy Power and other bookies because they had professional footballers as a spokesman, not even calling out Paddy Power. It's not like they're wearing green shorts or anything like that. And I just thought, you got to be joking me. Like, what kind of fascist, draconian country is this? And I was pretty disappointed in the UK when it came to that. So anyway, rather than bending over backwards and making a bland advertisement, we decided, fuck this. Let's make the ad we want and put it on YouTube. And that's what we did. So we were originally going to do like a 30, 60-second spot that could go on telly. But we just decided, well, since it's not going on telly, let's tell a more interesting story and tell the story that we want to tell. So that's where we got that ad from. And if you ever pay attention to UK ads, next time you watch TV, watch that they're very, very, very bland. And that's because there's some regulator that wants everybody to be like, leave it to Beaver and show no personality in the ads.
Especially with Paddy Power, because they were guerrilla marketing, and some of the things they used to do, like about the Pope or whoever it might be, quite controversial, and that helped drive their profile. But I imagine I'm trying to think now, did I ever see any of those adverts from Paddy Power on TV?
I don't think
You're probably
so.
Quite right. Yeah,
you might see an article about it in the Sun or something like that, but they were never on TV.
Has it been difficult to cut through and get extol the advantages of using SBK over some of the bigger names? I see you sponsoring like some of the Racing Post shows, for example.
Yeah, I mean, it has been difficult to cut through. I would say some of it is just, it's a saturated, mature market. Sports betting has been legal in the UK since the 60s, and online it's been prevalent for 20, 30 years. In the UK, it's a very well-known, very well understood, very saturated market. There's 5 or 6 big players. Of course, there's that. But I would say, if you want to get into inside baseball a little bit, we are an exchange company. And so when I was going back to the original premises of SBK, like, let's just take the exchange prices and put it in a sportsbook interface. That's all well and good. And we did that in 2019. When we went to market, what we realized is that retail bettors want exotic betting types that that concept does not exist in the exchange. Like bet builders doesn't really exist in exchange. Multiples don't really exist in exchange. All these like Yankees, Trixies, these kinds of exotic bets. And also retail bettors want to bet on different markets, different singles and different exotics. So we had to build all that stuff. And so I would say that the last 2 years, we've really, really been heads down to try to build a full functioning sports book. And we're just about finished with all those things. We launched Bet Builders, I would say a year ago, but we did a massive improvement on Bet Builders somewhat recently. We're in the process of adding prop bets from American sport markets. There's a lot of these markets that we underestimated the market demand for them. And I would say that's been the biggest thing slowing our growth down. Because once we sort of have a full functioning sports book that people enjoy using and we have the best odds, that's a pretty compelling marketing message. And I think right now we're suffering from, yes, we have the best odds for some things, but a lot of the stuff that people want to bet on, we're not able to offer that yet. But every week we're knocking out a new release and we're getting closer and closer to a full functioning sportsbook.
Mm-hmm. Yes, because you walk into any bookie in the UK, you're going to see lucky 15 slips are there, or lucky 31, and that's what the casual punter wants to place. They put his £1 lucky 15 on, and potentially have a life-changing return. Obviously, most of them are never going to get anywhere near that, but that ability to do that. But obviously, that then opens up the chances of you've got to be careful, because they're the type of bets where you can have big liabilities, and there's quite a lot of shrewd people out there who will pour over your odds and if there are any edges that are available.
Yeah, so Lucky 15s as an example, we don't offer it yet. I believe we're working on it right now, actually. So I would say in the next 2 or 3 months, it should be live in the site. But that's an example of something, like you said, that retail bettors want to do, but we don't offer it yet.
Exciting. Okay, I'll look out for that one. Speaking of retail, then, is there any plans for retail presence of a SBK, or even maybe also in other countries? I know you have a foothold in the States and Colorado. So what's the plans of growth for SBK as well?
Are you talking about like physical location or expanding the geographic footprint?
Yeah, 2 questions really in one. So what first would be retail presence, and then also how about your presence in other countries, whether that be just online?
I haven't seriously looked at it, but I always thought it'd be cool to make like a really funny hipster betting shop, just go all out and kind of make it themed and have people dressed up and stuff like that, and have a bit of fun with it. We have zero plans to sort of materially have a retail presence, but I think it could be kind of a fun pop-up shop to do, to just have take the concept and make it funny and all kinds of stuff. In terms of geographic expansion, we're trying to figure out the states right now. That's kind of our main puzzle. So we're live in Indiana and Colorado, and sort of riffing off this idea that we're missing different betting types. We also underestimated the American bettor has different betting patterns and wants to bet in different markets and stuff like that, and has a slightly different betting interface. And so we've been hard at work trying to customize that for the American audience. We have spent no money in marketing in the US, so we're quite small right now, but we're kind of taking a test and learn approach. And so I'm hopeful that in the next 6 months, 12 months, we'll have a very compelling U.S. proposition as well. And we're looking very much forward to growth coming from the U.S. as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's probably another topic for another podcast, talking about exchanges in the U.S. and all that kind of stuff, because I know that's probably a challenge. But I also want to talk about legality, regulation, and some of the new laws that are coming in, because that's a hot topic at the moment. And I'd be negligent if I didn't ask you these kind of questions, because, also good to get a sense of what it's like from an operator side of things. We hear a lot about how punters are feeling cheated, or feeling, they're dealing with checks that are just out of sync and out of order for them in terms of how much they make and affordability. So what's the situation from your perspective, and how difficult has it been more recently dealing with, trying to implement some rules at the moment which aren't grounded, and then trying to deal with what potentially might be coming down the pipeline?
Yeah, it's kind of a sea change in the industry. I think that, if you take a step back, I think for a long time, the sports betting industry had a free run at it. And the UKGC over the years has decided to take a stronger and stronger look. They recently have been finding lots of operators, and just for full transparency, I mean, it's public record, but we've been fined ourselves, and you can go into the UKGC and read about it. They've basically been going down the list of all UK operators and really beating up on their procedures and processes. And to the UKGC's credit, they found some deficiencies in our procedures, and we were very happy for the scrutiny, and we have fixed that. So I think there's a very good intention with what they're trying to do, and I think there's some very good effects of that. On the other side, I think politically and economically, sports betting is poorly understood. And I think it usually falls under the bucket of a sin industry, which I don't agree with, but it is considered a sin industry. And I think it's a very easy industry to beat up on. Now, I think some of the characters within the industry kind of fit that mold. And I think some of my colleagues and competitors are usury and take advantage of people and go too far. So, I'm not going to say it's not totally warranted, but I think if you take the industry as a whole, it's unfairly beat up on. I can't really think of another industry where the government doesn't let adults make their own choices. And so in sports betting and gambling in general, the government is taking a more of a, I hate to use this word, but like more of a nanny state kind of approach where the government doesn't trust adults to make their own choices. And they are putting a crazy burden on the operators to ferret out financial crime. There's two branches of this tree. There's the responsible gambling branch and there's the anti-money laundering branch. I love the intention of the responsible gambling branch. The thing that makes me most uncomfortable with that is that I don't think sports betting should be unfairly singled out. So if the intent is to make people make more responsible financial choices, I think that's a great objective. But I think that they should go after other industries. If I buy too many Cokes, or if I, sit on my couch all day long or whatever, or if I spend money on stuff that I can't afford, those are bad effects on my life, just sort of like a bad gambling habit can be in your life. So I would like to see the government sort of have a more broad-based approach to responsible spending and not just single out gambling, because I don't think it makes any sense that gambling is more or less bad than any other reckless spending. In terms of the financial crime aspect, the money laundering, and again, another great aspect, like who wants to have financial crime in their industry? Like I think every industry would kind of agree with that. Now, the problem I have is that let's say we get 90% of our money from credit cards and banks, or probably even more of that. I would say like close to 100% of our money comes from financial institutions in the UK. Now, these financial institutions theoretically have the same standards that we do. Mm-hmm. They have to, like I bank with Lloyds and Revolut. Lloyds and Revolut have a fiduciary duty, legal duty, blah, 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 to make sure that my money's clean. But if I deposit my quote unquote clean money from Lloyds, I have to do that check all over again. Now that I think is crazy. I think the government is being very lazy, not investing into financial crime police. And I also think it's very, what's the right word? Like punitive is coming to mind, but I would say more, why should one industry A, do the job of the government, and B, do a job that theoretically everybody else should be held to the same standard, but they're not. So the KYC stuff is incredibly onerous because, source of wealth, source of funds, A, it's hard to get that sometimes, especially if people are self-employed or they're match bettors or something like that. But B, it's incredibly intrusive information. I had one guy email me, and I believe him, that said he had to do less financial work to buy a house than he did with Smarkets. And it's just, to me, it's insane that the government is asking an operator to do this level of due diligence when they don't expect any other financial institution to do this or any other industry to do this. So as a thought experiment, think of the last time your UK bank has ever asked you to justify any payment that has come into your bank. They don't do it. But for some reason, if you want to bet £1,000 on SBK, we have to do it. And I think that's really bad.
And how many people are abiding by these checks? I talked to Anthony from AK Bets. He was saying 80% of the customers that he puts affordability checks or asks for information, they refuse to abide by it and they say, just close my account. Do you have a number?
I don't have the number to hand, but I do, anecdotally, I do know a large percentage don't complete the process.
And that must be, as you mentioned, how difficult is that? Because everyone's slightly different. You might have someone who's got inheritance, somebody that, like say, makes a degree of income. Do you get enough guidance, if you like, about how to oversee this, or is it a lot of guesswork about who may qualify to deposit X amount or Y amount based upon certain thresholds?
It's a lot of guesswork, and that's another unfortunate thing where the UKGC doesn't say you have to do this at this level. They say you have to exercise duty of care, and they use words like this, and they have vague definitions of what done is considered. So no, it's not. It is somewhat guesswork. In terms of like the industry, I think the industry has shrunk probably anecdotally 10 to 20, 30% because of this stuff. So like a lot of people have thrown their hands up and said, I'm not sharing this information with my gambling company, which I totally sympathize with because I wouldn't want to share this information with a company either. But unfortunately, it's sort of the way the government is running things right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really should be the banks overseeing a lot of this as well, shouldn't it? Because they have that information.
Absolutely. And then they have the full picture of somebody's financial history. And I've been a Lloyd's customer for 14 years, and I don't think they've once asked me, maybe when I first opened my account, they asked me for a proof of address, but I don't think they've ever asked me for proof of funds or anything like that. So I don't know why we should have a higher standard than Lloyd's.
And how's it impact from an exchange position? Because presumably you're dealing with people that are trading more, maybe have larger bankrolls than perhaps with bookmakers. How much more of a challenge is it for you?
Well, a lot of our customers are match bettors, and match betting kind of comes with a few different things. But one, match betting is usually super high volume, and so they hit the triggers a lot faster than a retail bettor. And the second thing is match bettors oftentimes make money from their own gambling profits. And that kind of puts us in a catch-22 about source of wealth. We try to find ways and work with customers to do that. But, like your previous guest said, some people are just like, sod this, I'm not going to deal with this anymore. And we lose a lot of our customers because of that.
Mm-hmm. And I guess as a challenge for you yourself as a company, the amount of detail and information you've got to contend with, how are you trying to structure that? Have you had to put extra resources in place, extra training to try and cope with all of these checks?
Yeah, we have an amazing compliance team and compliance department. So I really hats off to them. They've done a really great job of upgrading our capacity and our skill and all these kinds of things. So we've had to beef up that team for sure. And they've done a great job.
And what would you, in an ideal world, how would you like to see? Obviously, we've got the white paper and lots of debate going on right now. And, there's certain things like there's certain deposit limits and even winnings only count within the last 7 days. How would you like to see something restructured, something a little bit better and more thought out be implemented?
Well, the only way I could see that being morally consistent is if you had deposit limits, quote unquote, deposit limits across industries. I don't see why sports betting or gambling should be singled out.
No.
If you buy a car that you can't afford, or if you buy a house you can't afford, or if you buy a dress you can't afford, or if you send money to your friend who you can't afford to do that, what is it unique about sports betting that should make it be singled out? So I know I'm on the losing side of that argument. But, in general, I like government regulation. I believe that, the government's job is to make sure consumers are safe and protected and that companies don't take advantage of people. And so I don't want to say that, I do think that the UKGC is trying to do the best that they can, especially in a really, really tough political environment. And it's, like I said, it's such an easy industry to kind of beat up on because it comes under that sin bucket. But I would like to see them treat people more like adults and let adults make their own decisions. I think it's fine to sort of audit. I mean, they have to audit the operators. I think they should balance it against the other industries. I think we shouldn't have a tougher standard than the banking industry, for example. Mm. And that's the direction I'd like to see. The other thing I would like to see, there was a really great expose that kind of came out on the FT actually today about the illegal betting sites that are sponsoring the Premier League teams. There's actually a lot of dodgy money in sports betting, and I would love to see enforcement against offshore operators. And I would also love to see enforcement against onshore operators. And there's some really big names in there that are taking bets where they shouldn't be taking bets.
Yep.
So my big thing is I would like to see the UKGC make a more even playing field, because the negative effect of having illegal, quote unquote, illegal sports betting in the UK is that it really changes the economics of the system. So a lot of these Premier League sponsors are based in Asia. They're not necessarily competing with the Asian customer, but you're affecting the market. The other thing there are domestic operators that are taking bets where they shouldn't be. And then that lets them make more money than somebody that's following the rules, and then they're able to get more bonuses and all that kind of stuff. So I would really like to see the UK GC enforce those laws.
I agree. And I think it's really interesting you've said that. It's something I've raised a couple of times on Twitter. We have the double standards where you've got, the industry body talking about the fear of the growth of the black market when they have, big companies within their membership taking full advantage of that in other jurisdictions. So I would like to see that tackled, absolutely. And that's a really good point to make. Jason, thank you ever so much for your upfront answers and for your clarity today in explaining Smarkets SBK. I've already asked you about plans for the future. I did have a couple more questions though, because I've heard you on a podcast before talk about reducing commission levels. I think you said even 2% is high. What's the goal? Do you think that's realistic to actually begin to force that lower?
Well, the word I like to use is called asymptotic, which is a fancy way of saying you'll never get there, but you're trying to get there. So I would like to asymptotically approach zero, but we have to be a business as well. So we're trying to straddle that difference between being a profitable business and giving the best value to our customers. So as we get more scale, we absolutely want to be compressing the margins further and further.
Okay. And any plans to get involved with cryptocurrency at all as well? Because that would, in theory, reduce those costs perhaps?
I hate crypto. I'm a crypto hater. I think it's dumb technology. Maybe I think if somebody wants to use crypto and bet on our site, I don't think that there's any reason why we shouldn't let them bet in a token if they want to use that to trade. But I'm not making a crypto only exchange. We probably won't do, but I would be all for adding a crypto as a payment method.
Okay, great stuff. Well, thank you ever so much for coming on. If people want to have any questions, perhaps if someone's dealing with affordability, or if maybe just have questions about Smarkets or SBK, is there a best way for people to get in touch?
They can email me, jason.trost@smarkets.com. In terms of affordability, and I'm happy to try to help customers where I can, but I usually have somebody will double check that, and I'm not involved in the process. But if you've had a bad user experience, please reach out to me and I will have a look at that. And if you want to talk about any other kind of user experience stuff, very happy to talk to customers anytime.
Yeah, that's great. You've got the CEO's email there, so you can't get much better than that, can you? So
there you go.
There you go. Yeah, so thanks ever so much. I do encourage people to go check out Smarkets and SBK because there are some really good odds, obviously low commission and all the other things we've spoken about today. It's a really good platform and trying to encourage people to go and check it out. So thank you ever so much, Jason, for your time. And I look forward to seeing how Smarkets and SBK grow in the future.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me on.